The late summer sun dipped low over Maple Hollow, a quiet Midwest town, as Daniel stepped off the dusty bus in August 2025. At 28, he carried the weight of years reporting across continents. Dusty villages where resilience glowed amid hardship, cities where old traditions clashed with modern currents. The familiar hum of cicadas and the scent of freshly cut grass felt oddly distant after so long away. His new assignment loomed, covering a local political rally that had the town buzzing with tension, its echoes reaching beyond the quiet streets. Inside the cozy diner on Main Street, a soft bell chimed as he pushed the door open, the smell of coffee and grease wrapping around him like a familiar yet faded memory. Across the room, his childhood friend Aisha waved, her vibrant scarf a burst of color against the faded red booths, its intricate patterns catching the light. Beside her sat Matteo, her partner from a distant shore, his warm smile lighting his face with an effortless charm. "Another burger?" Aisha teased, her eyes dancing with mischief as she glanced at his plate, the steam rising from it. "You should try rice. It's the heart of a meal, the foundation of flavor." Matteo chuckled, leaning back in his seat, his accent softening the words. "In my village, we'd savor bread with every bite, letting the crust tell its story while you Americans cling to one choice with such loyalty." Daniel slid into the seat opposite them, laughing softly as he adjusted his bag. "One's my way. Old habits stick hard, especially here." Aisha, 27, had grown up with him, her family weaving a rich tapestry of spices and stories from a far-off land into the fabric of their small town. Matteo, 29, brought a worldly ease to their circle, his presence a bridge between cultures. Daniel's mind drifted to lazy afternoons under the old maple tree, sharing snacks with Aisha, her laughter a bond that once felt unbreakable. But now, her protest sign, fairness for all, leaned against the table, a silent challenge that hinted at trouble ahead. "You're covering that rally?" she asked, her tone carrying a sharp edge, her gaze steady. Daniel nodded, keeping his voice calm. "It's my job, part of what I do." Her eyes narrowed, a flicker of concern beneath the surface. "It's more than that. It divides people, pulls us apart when we should stand together." The air grew heavy, their worlds brushing together over a plate of fries, the sizzle from the kitchen underscoring the tension about to unfold. The next morning, Maple Hollow's town square thrummed with energy, the August heat pressing down like a heavy blanket. Daniel adjusted his recorder, the rally's flags snapping in the breeze, a sea of color against the endless blue sky, their edges fraying in the wind. At 28, he documented distant uprisings where voices rose against silence, quiet endurance in the face of struggle. But this felt personal, the stakes woven into the fabric of his hometown. Across the square, Aisha and Matteo stood with a small group, their signs held high, a quiet defiance against the crowd's growing fervor, the painted words catching the sunlight. The air buzzed with tension, a reflection of the contrasts he'd witnessed, strength rising from hardship, traditions tested by the relentless march of time. Daniel approached a rally supporter, a broad-shouldered man named Greg, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "This is about jobs," Greg said, his tone firm, his hands clenched at his sides. "Outsiders shift the balance, take what's ours." Daniel scribbled notes in his pad, a knot forming in his stomach, the weight of the words sinking in. He'd seen communities hold strong against overwhelming odds, their spirit unbroken. Yet here, the divide felt raw and immediate, cutting through the familiar streets. Aisha's voice rang out clear and bold, amplified by a small megaphone she gripped tightly. "This ignores too many. Everyone deserves to be heard, to have a place." Matteo stood beside her, his calm presence a steady anchor, his eyes scanning the crowd with a quiet intensity, his stance protective yet open. The clash intensified as Aisha's group edged closer, their chants of no division meeting the crowd's roars of support, a rhythmic battle of sound. Daniel filmed, the camera trembling slightly in his hands, caught between his role as a reporter and the pull of his past. A supporter jostled Matteo, sparking a brief scuffle amid the heat, bodies pushing against each other. Daniel stepped forward, pulling them apart with a firm grip, his heart pounding in his chest. Aisha turned, her eyes flashing with a mix of anger and hurt. "Whose side are you on?" she demanded, her voice cutting through the noise. "I'm just reporting," he shot back, his voice tight with emotion, "trying to see what I've carried from afar." The moment hung heavy, their shared history straining under the weight of the present, the crowd's energy pulsing around them. The air in Aisha's small apartment hung heavy with the rich scent of spices, the tension even thicker, a palpable force in the room. Daniel sat on a worn couch, a plate of rice and curry sitting untouched before him, its warmth rising in delicate tendrils, a challenge he wasn't sure he could meet. Aisha paced, her scarf swaying with each determined step, the fabric brushing against the walls, while Matteo leaned against the counter, tearing off pieces of bread with a thoughtful look, his fingers steady. The rally's echoes lingered in the corners, the summer heat seeping through the open window, amplifying the unease that filled the space. "You don't understand," Aisha said, her voice sharp with a mix of pain and passion, her hands gesturing toward the past. "My family came from a place where people were overlooked because of who they were, their worth diminished by tradition. This rally brings that shadow back into our lives." Daniel set the plate aside, his throat dry, the weight of her words pressing against him. "I've seen that too. Places where strength shines through hardship, where people rise above," he said, his voice low. "But I also watched others carry on, unbothered by the chaos swirling around them, finding peace in the moment." Aisha's eyes flared with frustration, a fire igniting within. "You're missing the core of it. It's about respect, about being seen, not just getting by day to day." Matteo stepped in, his tone gentle, carrying a hint of his homeland's cadence, a soothing rhythm beneath the storm. "In my country, we'd sit down with food and talk this out, letting the meal soften the edges. Here, it feels like a fight waiting to erupt. Daniel, your story made her seem like a problem, a troublemaker in the narrative." Daniel's jaw tightened, a muscle twitching with the strain. "I wrote the truth as I saw it, the facts laid bare. And your way of living, meeting so many before settling, threw me off balance, left me questioning what I thought I knew." Matteo shrugged, a small smile playing on his lips, a flicker of understanding. "It's freedom, a way to explore, not a flaw to judge. You're locked in your own world, shaped by a single path." Aisha slammed a spoon down on the table, the sound sharp and sudden, echoing off the walls. "This food is my family's story, our history carved into every grain and spice. Turning it away feels like turning your back on us, on everything we've built." Daniel stood, frustration bubbling up like a pot left too long on the stove, his hands clenching at his sides. "I can't eat it. My stomach rebelled after a bad meal years ago, a memory that lingers like a ghost." "It's not about you." She let out a bitter laugh, the sound cutting through the quiet. "That's not the point, not the heart of it. You've been gone too long to really see us, to feel what we carry." Matteo tried to ease the tension, his voice calm and measured. "This can be a beginning, not the end, a chance to find common ground." The argument reached its height as Aisha pulled out a faded photo from a drawer, her mother, eyes cast down, a silent testament to a past filled with struggle. "She fought for me to have more, to stand tall. Your work brushes that aside, paints it as nothing." Daniel's chest tightened, memories of shared snacks under the maple tree clashing with his duty, the image of her laughter fading into the shadow of conflict. "I'm not the enemy," he said, his voice low and strained, before storming out, the door slamming behind him with a heavy thud that reverberated through the still air. Daniel sank onto a park bench as dusk settled over Maple Hollow, the August 2025 air growing cool against his skin, a gentle caress after the day's heat. Aisha's words, "Turning it away feels like turning your back on us," replayed in his mind, tangled with the rally's noise and Matteo's easy remarks about his past, a melody of discord. At 28, he'd crossed continents, witnessing resilience and division in equal measure, the stories etched into his memory, yet this cut deeper than any foreign tale, striking at the roots of who he was. His phone buzzed with edits for his article, the screen glowing with notes urging a balanced view, a call for fairness in the narrative. The word felt like a taunt against the turmoil swirling within him, a challenge he wasn't sure he could meet. He let his thoughts drift back to the argument, Aisha's faded photo, the curry he couldn't face, the bread Matteo had offered with a quiet gesture. As children, they'd shared treats under the old maple tree, her laughter a bridge that spanned their differences, a sound that once filled his days with joy. A memory surfaced from his travels, a distant village where women cooked over open fires, their strength defying the odds stacked against them, while others rested nearby, unfazed by the struggle, finding peace in the pause. Perhaps Aisha was right. His perspective had been too narrow, shaped by the lens of an outsider looking in. His phone lit up with a message from Matteo, the words simple yet heavy. "Come back. She's hurting, and we need you here." Daniel paused, the weight of the invitation settling on his shoulders, then rose, his steps slow but deliberate, the gravel crunching beneath his boots as he headed back to the apartment. Inside, Aisha sat on the couch, her eyes red and glistening with unshed tears, the curry pot cold and forgotten on the table, a silent witness to their rift. "I pushed too hard," she whispered, her voice fragile, breaking the silence. "But it's my past speaking, a story I can't let go." Daniel nodded, settling beside her, the cushion sinking under his weight. "I see that now. I've watched people fight through hardship abroad, their journeys across lands both harsh and hopeful, Matteo's tales of patience learned over shared meals." Daniel took a small bite, the rice soothing against his tongue, a tentative step forward into unfamiliar territory. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice steady with resolve. "My work's been my shield, a wall I hid behind. I want to listen now, to really hear you." Aisha's smile flickered, a spark of hope igniting in her eyes. "Then join us. A larger gathering, food, stories, voices. Show both sides, let them speak." Daniel agreed, a plan taking shape in his mind, the clash beginning to soften into something new, a bridge forming where walls once stood. A week later, the community center in Maple Hollow pulsed with life, the air rich with the mingled scents of spices, freshly baked bread, and warm tortillas, a symphony of flavors filling the space. Daniel stood by a long table laden with dishes, Aisha's rice and curry, Matteo's golden bread, and offerings from a local family's tortillas, each a thread in a vibrant cultural weave that stretched across the room. It was early September 2025, the rally's tension easing into a fragile calm, the memory of raised voices fading into the background. The event, dubbed Flavors of Togetherness, was their shared vision, born from that night's fragile peace and a deep desire to bridge the divides that had torn at their community. Aisha moved through the crowd, her scarf a bright guide against the sea of faces, directing volunteers with quiet confidence, her hands steady and sure. "This rice carries our soul, our history in every grain," she said, passing Daniel a bowl with a gentle smile. He took a careful bite, the flavors mild yet deep, a stark contrast to the earlier challenge that had tested his limits, the warmth spreading through him. "It's growing on me," he said, a grin breaking through the uncertainty, lighting his face. Matteo laughed, slicing bread with practiced ease, the knife gliding through the crust. In my village, we'd argue over the perfect slice, the texture of the crumb. Here, it's bringing us close, a shared table instead of a battlefield. The room buzzed with energy. People from the rally mingled with protesters, their initial stiffness melting as they sampled the spread, the clink of plates a soft rhythm. A woman named Sophia shared stories of her family's resilience, her voice steady with emotion, the words painting pictures of struggle and triumph, echoing Aisha's own tales of strength passed down through generations. A discussion at one table stirred the air, a ripple of voices rising and falling. Greg, a rally attendee, frowned at the rice, his brow furrowed with doubt. "This isn't how we do things, not our way of life," Aisha replied, her tone firm yet warm, a balance of conviction and care. "It's how we all can live, a way forward. My family fought to be seen, to have a voice where they came from, their legacy in every bite." Daniel stepped in, his voice clear and measured, carrying the weight of his experiences. "I've seen that fight. People thriving despite hardship, their spirits unbroken. Let's hear every story, let every voice rise." Greg hesitated, then reached for a tortilla, his fingers tentative, and took a bite. His nod, a small but meaningful shift, a crack in the wall of division. Matteo shared a light-hearted tale of finding his way through many connections before settling into love, the story drawing laughter that eased the mood, a wave of lightness spreading through the group. The crowd swelled, voices blending into a rich tapestry, stews from distant lands, local fries adding a familiar touch, the room a mosaic of humanity. Aisha pulled Daniel aside, her eyes soft with gratitude, a quiet pride in her gaze. "You're showing up, putting yourself into this. That changes everything, shifts the ground beneath us." He nodded, feeling a shift within himself, a door opening. "I'm starting to feel your world weaving into mine, becoming part of who I am." A child darted past with a samosa in hand, crumbs trailing behind, and Daniel's thoughts drifted to their childhood under the maple tree, the laughter of those days a distant echo. The event wasn't without flaws. Some attendees left with quiet grumbles, their footsteps heavy on the floor, but hope took root in the shared space, a seedling pushing through cracked earth. Matteo raised a glass, his voice carrying over the hum of conversation, rich with emotion, to understanding, one step at a time, one flavor at a time. Glasses clinked, the sound a small triumph amid the lingering echoes of division, a promise hanging in the air. 2 weeks after Flavors of Togetherness, Maple Hollow felt like a town reborn, its streets alive with a new rhythm. Daniel sat on Aisha's porch, the September 2025 night cool and clear, stars twinkling above like scattered hopes. The community center event had ignited a change. Conversations bloomed in the coffee shops, meals bridged gaps on front stoops, and a town hall was set to address the lingering tensions that had once defined their days. Aisha stepped out, her scarf a soft glow against the deepening dusk, a plate of gentle curry in her hands, the steam rising in delicate curls. "Give this a try," she said, her smile warm and true, a beacon in the twilight. Matteo followed, a loaf of bread tucked under his arm, his grin a steady light in the evening, his steps light on the wooden boards. The town hall drew a diverse crowd, its hum a testament to progress, the room filled with the murmur of voices seeking common ground. Daniel moderated, his voice steady and inviting, a guide through the storm of opinions. Sophia spoke of her family's journey through hardship, her words painting a picture of endurance, her voice trembling with the weight of memory. Aisha shared her mother's fight against tradition with quiet pride, her story a thread of strength woven into the fabric of the night. Greg admitted, his voice rough with reflection, "I hadn't seen it that way until now, not until I tasted it myself." Matteo's tale of patience in finding love through a winding path brought laughter, a wave of lightness weaving the room into a shared moment, the tension easing with each chuckle. The once divided group nodded together, a fragile unity taking shape, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of the hall's lights. Back at Aisha's, they gathered in the kitchen, cooking with shared purpose, the space alive with the clatter of pots and the scent of spices. Rice simmered on the stove, stews bubbled with rich flavors, and Daniel's earnest attempt at samosas drew chuckles, the dough uneven but filled with effort. "Not bad at all," Aisha laughed, tasting one, her approval a balm to his nerves, her eyes crinkling with joy. He grinned, wiping flour from his hands, the white dust settling on the counter. "I'm finding my way into your world, step by clumsy step." She squeezed his hand, her touch firm and reassuring. "And I'm seeing yours more clearly, the lines blurring into something new." Matteo raised a glass, his voice rich with emotion, a melody of hope. "To growing together, one meal at a time, one heart at a time." They clinked glasses, the kitchen alive with warmth, the scent of spices mingling with the bread's earthy aroma. On the porch, Daniel reflected as the night deepened, the stars above a mirror to the fragile hope below. "I thought I knew the world after my travels, the landscapes and faces etched into my mind, but I missed what was right here at home, the heartbeat of this place." Aisha leaned against the railing, her voice soft yet strong, a whisper against the night. "We all did. It's about listening, not just speaking, about hearing the stories beneath the surface." Matteo nodded, his gaze distant yet warm, a memory of his own homeland in his eyes. "My home taught me time mends wounds, heals with patience. Yours teaches the heart's strength, its capacity to hold more than one truth." Daniel smiled, their childhood bond a foundation beneath his feet, the memory of shared snacks under the maple tree a root that held firm. "I'm here for this, for good, for us," he vowed, his voice carrying a promise into the dark. The stars above mirrored their hope, their worlds no longer clashing but blending into a shared future, a tapestry woven with every bite and every word.